Hello and welcome you to another very interesting session on another industry that I've been studying for the last couple of weeks. So today we will take a look at the nuclear power industry, the civil nuclear power industry. And let me share my screen. Okay, so first of all, simple disclaimer. So all the information that we have in this presentation is sourced from publicly available information. Uh, all the stocks that we are going to talk about, uh, they are not recommendations to buy and sell. Please consult your financial advisor for investing. The objective of this presentation is to take a look at this industry, which is sort of nascent and in a phase where it's just beginning its growth. So let's take a look. So firstly, when we talk about civil nuclear power plant, uh, the first nuclear power plant was built up in 1957. So roughly about 75 years back in a place called Shippingport in Pennsylvania in the US. Since then, in the 60s and 70s, there was a big spurt in nuclear power. All this happened right after the Second World War, where the first time we saw the power of we actually saw the power of nuclear energy, right, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After the Second World War, a lot of European countries, America, they got together and thought that nuclear power should be, or nuclear energy should be harnessed for civilian and peaceful purposes. And that was the start of the nuclear power, civil nuclear power programs across these countries. What followed after a few years were three major disasters. And whenever, even today, we talk about nuclear power, we actually, the first thing that comes to mind is Chernobyl, of course, and for some, the Fukushima disaster that happened in 2011. But the first major disaster that happened in a nuclear power plant was the 3 Mile Island accident, which happened in 1979. And till date, it remains the only nuclear power plant accident that happened in the US. Although there were no major casualties, but this was the first time that the world saw a accident in a nuclear power plant. Then obviously 1986, Chernobyl was one of the, and probably still remains one of the most critical disasters of nuclear power program anywhere in the world. Then 2011, and this is the most recent, what happened was in Fukushima, Japan, what happened was it was hit by a very large earthquake of 9.0 Richter scale. And even in that earthquake, there were no major problems with the power plant. The automatic cutoff had got triggered and things were getting under control. But what really made a big mess was the tsunami that followed the earthquake, and that resulted in leakage of radioactive material in the sea and in the surrounding areas. So with this problem in mind, and whenever we talk about nuclear power, the first challenge that we think about is that what happens if there is a disaster. But the technology since Chernobyl, since Fukushima has changed significantly. Safety parameters have gone up significantly, so much so that amongst all power producing technologies, I think that the one which has one of the least uh, risks of death is nuclear today. I mean, it is probably second uh, lowest in terms of the risk of death. I think the lowest is solar. So climate imperatives, climate change, global warming is one of the most important driving factors for the use of nuclear. So if you see the last 10 years between 2015 to 2024, the world has actually gone and started rebuilding nuclear power plants. Obviously, again, led by China. If you look at the last, I think, 2 decades, any major infrastructure development has been led by China, right? And India has done, I would say, reasonably well. We've not done great, but we've done reasonably well. We stand sixth in the list of countries which has added nuclear power capacity. Now, the other interesting thing that has happened is because of these green energy challenge in the last COP28 that happened in 2023, there were 20 countries which pledged to triple their global nuclear capacity by 2050, right? And globally right now, there are about 69 nuclear reactors which are under construction and another 110 which is planned. So roughly 180 odd new nuclear power reactors, new nuclear power plants are going to go up in the world in the next few years. Now, we already did talk about the fact that Europe and North America, led by US, actually had a head start. So if you look at this chart, you will see that in the 70s and 80s, North America and Europe actually started doing nuclear power plant installations in a large, quite a lot. And it actually went on till about late 1990s. And then it sort of tapered off. So if you see, North America is more or less stagnant from around 2000. And Europe is gradually coming down, primarily because I think Germany and some of the other countries have scaled down on their older reactors. Asia had gone up and then again down by 2012. And then again it is rising, primarily led by China and to a small extent by India. South America and Africa, etc., are not there as yet in terms of implementation of nuclear power. What is interesting in this particular chart or in this particular scheme of things is France, as a consumer of power, has 68%, right, which is more than 2/3 of its power demand met by nuclear power, which is the great highest in the world. A lot of other smaller European countries also have very large percentage of power demand coming in from nuclear. Now, India started its civil nuclear program in 1969. So we are also a fairly early starter in this field. But because India was not a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, all kinds of technology transfer, raw material transfer, etc., was completely banned. So this actually led to one major benefit, which is that India actually has become Atmanirbhar in terms of the entire technology required for nuclear power in the nuclear power stations. So we need to understand that, or we need to remember that in today's light, where we see that the US president is talking about putting high tariffs against India. And the point here is, in short term, sometimes these kinds of barriers act as problems because you don't get access to either capital or technology or market. But if you're determined as a country or as a company or as an industry, then over the longer term, it might actually serve you better, because you end up developing your own technology. We've seen this play out in China, right? I mean, uh, US has been preventing access to China for many things. I mean, AI chips and a lot of other new cutting edge technology. But ultimately, what we find is that China is actually building the entire technology stack by themselves, right? And maybe over a few years, maybe few decades, China might be actually in a position to uh, compete head on with the US. Now, coming back to India and nuclear. So, India basically developed self-sufficiency across the entire nuclear energy cycle, from mining, fabrication, fuel fabrication, reactor design, waste management, the entire thing, right? The latest that we are looking at is the small fast breeder reactors, SBRs, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Uh, Also, we've got a Viksit Bharat mission of giving fillip to the nuclear civil power program in India, where currently we are roughly around 8 gigawatts, and the plan is to take it to around 22 to 22.5 by 2031 and 2031 32, and around 100 gigawatts by 2047. So very large ambition. Even if we don't get to 100, even if let's say we get to 50, 60, so that also is a major leap from where we are currently, right? So if you look at what is going on, I'll not get into the details of each, but primarily we have about 25 reactors in 8 plants currently in India, and 11 more are under construction. And the near term target to reach to that 2031-32 is to add another 10 more, right? And beyond that, the plan is not there currently, or it has not been published as yet, but this is where we stand. So it's very evident that we are going to go from 8 or 25 reactors to adding another 2021 in the next few years. So India's nuclear program is basically a 3-stage program formulated by the legendary Homi Bhabha. And his idea was that India does not have a lot of uranium reserves, but we have very large thorium reserves. We are home to one of the largest thorium reserves in the world. And the idea was to actually start using thorium for in our nuclear power stations. So the 3 stages that Dr. Bhabha actually envisaged was, the first stage was natural uranium uh, being used in the pressurized heavy water reactors, the PHWRs. This is also the most frequently used reactor in the initial and the current reactors that are there. Then we move on to the fast breeder reactors using plutonium based fuel, and then move on to advanced nuclear power systems for the utilization of thorium. So thorium based, we are 25% of the world's thorium in India. And the challenge with thorium is that it is not directly usable in reactors, right? It needs to be converted into another material, which is U233. Then it becomes nuclear fuel, right? And this conversion process is fairly complex. The idea is to first use uranium to create a special material, plutonium, which can then be used to kickstart that process of converting thorium into usable fuel. So that is what the thorium based fuel utilization program is all about. And the other focus currently is on the small modular reactors, where instead of having very large reactors in place, we will look at very small reactors, which will be able, where we will be able to build and deploy that in small areas, catering to maybe one city or a very specific industry cluster and things like that. So we are calling them the Bharat Small Reactors, BSR. So what are the things that are changing on the ground? And this is very interesting. Is as of now the only government entities or PSUs can own and operate nuclear power plants, right? So that is the current situation that is there. Uh, what we'll also discuss is this is changing recently in last 6 months to a year. These things have been getting updated, and we are now seeing private participation in operating nuclear power plants or building nuclear power plants. Although the ownership even now continues to remain with the government, namely NPCIL, Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. In 2016, what happened was there was an amendment which allowed for the supply chain or auxiliary services, etc., to be where the private participation was allowed, but the ownership continues to remain with the government. No, FDI, foreign investment, etc., is allowed in our civil nuclear program, which is, I think, pretty obvious. The other very, very important thing is the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, and the government has gone on record saying that they are looking to amend it so that the private players are sort of incentivized, or they're not disincentivized from getting into nuclear power. From the private sector, we've looked at, or we are seeing fairly good interest. So we look at, say, a Jindal Nuclear Power Private Limited is a investment approximately 1.8 lakh crores over the next 2 decades. The company aims to contribute 18 gigawatts to India's ambitious target of 100 gigawatts. I think if I'm not wrong, I think Jindal Nuclear Power is the first private limited company which has been created by the private sector to specifically work only on nuclear power. Vedanta Group lately has been in the news for all the wrong reasons, but they have also floated an expression of interest seeking bids from global firms to build 5 gigawatts of nuclear power. Tata Power has already shortlisted 6 sites for nuclear projects. And this year in Advantage Assam Investment Summit, the Chandra, who's the Tata Group chairman, he also sort of promised that Tata Group will also get into the manufacture of the small reactors. Adani, again, one of the major power players in India, they have also committed to, or not committed, but they've planned to set up 30 gigawatts of nuclear power in the long term. And their plan is, as and when all their existing thermal power capacity comes to the end of life, they will replace that with nuclear. So that is the intent that the private sector is showing in this sector. What has been, from the policy front, these are all discussions, nothing, most of them have not been so finalized as yet in terms of the FDI, but India is actually thinking about allowing up to 49% of FDI in nuclear energy. The World Bank, very interestingly, has ended the ban on funding nuclear energy, and this has happened primarily because a lot of end of life of the existing reactors needs to be now updated, and a lot of the countries are talking about small modular reactors in the developing world, in also in Europe. So previously, World Bank had a ban on providing funding for building nuclear power plants. They've taken that away in June of this year. So that's a very, very important and interesting development. India has also, like I said, talked about amending the atomic energy and nuclear liability laws. And in this in the last budget, the government actually allocated 20,000 crores for the nuclear mission for the small modular reactors, with the expectation that 5 of them would be ready by 2033. So the whole point I'm trying to make here is that there is policy, uh, there is very clear policy direction. There is funding coming in from the government. There is interest coming in from the private sector because of mainly two reasons. One is the clean source of power, and the second is that low operating cost, which is what we will look at here. Now, if I compare different power sources, what we see is that setting up a nuclear power plant is very, very expensive. So it is between 2 to 4 times more expensive to set up than other sources. So solar is typically, say, per gigawatt, solar is roughly 3,500 to 5,000 crores. Wind is 5,500 to 6,500 crores. Thermal is roughly between 7,500 to 9,500 crores. Whereas for nuclear, it is between 15,000 to 20,000 crores. So the amount of amount of money required is significantly large, and the amount of time required to build a power plant is also extremely high. So solar and wind, roughly 1 to 2 years, you can get it up and running. A thermal power plant takes roughly between 4 to 5 years, and nuclear takes about 7 to 10 years, right? The tariff right now is sort of comparable to solar and wind, but lower than thermal. The disadvantage of solar and wind is that these low tariffs that we are seeing on this chart here is actually not the complete cost, because both wind and solar require storage support, right? You cannot, because wind and solar are intermittent sources of power. So you need to be able to store that for continuous use. And that is one of the reasons why the actual final cost is more or less at par with what nuclear sort of delivers. Now, the advantage with nuclear is that once you set it up, once the firm is in place, once the reactor is in place, then it is cleaner source of energy, which is one of its biggest selling point. And second is that it is one of the lowest cost producers with a stable baseload power. That is very, very important. Now, if we do a SWOT analysis of the Indian nuclear power plant opportunity, obviously the strength is that operating costs are low, the stable, it has a stable base load supply, energy security, fuel independence. So once you have enough nuclear power plants, you are not then dependent on, getting, you're not dependent on coal, you're not dependent on, a lot more of fossil fuels, etc. Carbon emissions are the lowest amongst all other, traditional, other than, maybe solar, etc. High capacity factor, and the other very important point is we can build the entire power plant in the country. The weaknesses, obviously, like we discussed, very high capital costs, very long gestation. Uranium supply, fuel supply is limited. There are constraints in mining. Private participation is limited or constrained. The regulatory and liability framework is very, very complicated. And the most important and perhaps the biggest weakness of nuclear power is public perception and land acquisition. Whenever a new power plant is announced, nuclear power plant is announced, you will find local people actually rallying against it. Whether it is Karnataka last year, I think Karnataka last year, this year, Rajasthan last year. So everywhere you will find that the local people do not want a nuclear power plant next to their home. So it's basically what we call the NIMBY effect. We want it, but we don't want it in our backyard. NIMBY is not in my backyard. Everybody wants the benefits, but they want it. They want the power coming from somewhere else. The opportunities, obviously, decarbonization, cleaner energy. The technology is ours. If we are able to use thorium, then the ability to get cheap, sustainable power abundantly is very, very high. We can actually be pioneers of small breeder reactors and sell it to other countries in the world, and we can be a global leader in civil nuclear program, power program globally. Threats, obviously, there is competition from renewables because they are easier to build, very less time. So solar, there is a lot of work going on in solar, wind, etc. A lot of work happening in the BESS area, the battery energy storage systems. So the more and more denser batteries that are available, the cost and storage space required for solar power, wind power is going to go down. So those are significant challenges that are there. Obviously, anti-nuclear sentiment, protests on the ground, all these things are challenges. Then you have a nuclear waste management problem. So after you use your raw material, whether it is uranium or thorium or whatever, right, you need to be able to manage and actually handle the waste in a proper manner, and the regulatory process, etc., needs to be very, very stringent. And of course, because the funding required is significant, the financial constraints are always going to remain with nuclear power. So these, in a nutshell, is what are the opportunities, the SWOT of this industry. Now, quickly let's look at companies, and this is only a very partial list. There are a lot of other smaller companies doing various parts. So a nuclear power plant, in a nuclear power plant, you will need right from EPC, building up the power plant, to the reactors, to wires, to heat exchangers, everything, right? Pumps, pipes. So a lot of these companies, directly or indirectly, are part of the nuclear supply chain in India. The two biggest are the top two ones that I've highlighted. Obviously, Larsen and Toubro and BHEL. These two are the big boys in the power supply space in India. They make a large part of the reactors, and they are at the cutting edge of technology when it comes to nuclear power, civil nuclear power in the country. Now let's very quickly look at the news flow, and then we'll probably come to an end. So let's look at what is happening. So NTPC is setting up, is actively planning to set up a plant in Bihar. So that's a very interesting piece of work that is happening. Ashwini JV, joint venture. So this is a joint venture between the NPCIL, which is actually the mother organization of nuclear power in India, with NTPC. And this joint venture is going to go ahead and build nuclear power plants across the country. Like I said, BHEL, BHEL is a very big player in this space. They've been at the forefront of building reactors, generators, etc. If you look at other PSUs, right, very recently, I mean, last week we saw NTPC and ONGC again talk about various nuclear power programs. They're talking to different foreign vendors, primarily Russia-based and Germany-based, to again build reactors, power plants in India. L&T, like I said, very big player. Earlier this year, they dispatched the fourth steam generator to the Kaiga Atomic Power Station. So Again, lot you can actually look at all these. I don't need to go through them one by one. The idea here is to sort of capture the fact that a lot of things are happening in the nuclear space. Here are some more, right? KSB Pumps is has tied up with Laikala. I don't know if I'm spelling it correctly. They are a nuclear energy company based out of Sweden. Uh, KSB has been tying up with them. KSB also a very significant player in the pump space in the uh, uh, both KSB and the Kirloskar brothers work with the nuclear power pumps. Uh, so very interesting things which are happening. Again, Megha Engineering was the first private sector nuclear power order which happened in April this year. Uh, Another very interesting thing is railways is one of the very large consumers of power. So railways is now talking to the Department of Atomic Energy. They're in discussion with NPCIL to build their own uh, nuclear power plants or nuclear power stations for their captive use. Right. So that, in a nutshell, is what I really wanted to share with you. This is not an opportunity of tomorrow, today, tomorrow. This is an opportunity that is going to play out over the next uh, you know maybe next decade or more. So over a period, these are going to become large power oriented themes that we are looking at, and one which is what I call part of the transition economy of the country, right? Where we are moving from one state to the other. Here, in this particular case, we are moving from fossil fuel, thermal power to renewables and to nuclear. With that, let me close for today. Thank you. Thanks for watching, and do put in your comments and feedback in the comment section.